Right now, 100 million radiation-blasted flesh-eating flies are raining down over the jungles of Panama. Their mission? To wage a never-ending genocide. These flies are rebuilding a wall of flesh that protects an entire continent. This war has been going on for more than 50 years, stretching from Central America to the deserts of Libya, and it's one of the most successful battles humanity has ever fought. To understand why, we need to look at one of the most terrifying parasites on Earth. Its scientific name is Cochleomya hominivirax, which translates to the man-eater. Known as the New World screwworm fly, this metallic blue-green insect with bright red eyes survives only by consuming the flesh of warm-blooded animals. These flies can detect the faintest trace of blood from a great distance. If a human, deer, or even a squirrel has so much as a scratch, female screwworms will rush to lay their eggs in the wound. When the larvae hatch, they don't just feed on dead tissue. They bore into healthy, living flesh using sharp mandibles. The resulting wounds are gruesome and can attract more flies. Left untreated, the infestation can lead to severe debilitation or death. Cochleomya contributes nothing positive to the ecosystem. For much of history, it was simply a horrifying part of life in the Americas. But things got drastically worse when farmers introduced vast numbers of cattle to the southern United States. This abundance of fresh, wounded livestock created a screwworm paradise, resulting in catastrophic outbreaks. Herds could be wiped out, and countless wild animals suffered lingering, agonizing deaths. Traditional methods of pest control were useless. You couldn't poison a parasite that lived inside the body of a living host, and you couldn't stop animals from getting wounds or flies from finding them. Desperation set in. Ranchers spent endless hours inspecting animals, treating wounds, and trying to save newborns. But the flies were winning. Then, in the 1950s, two scientists proposed a radical idea. What if we could nuke the screwworms? They had discovered a weakness in the parasite's life cycle. Females only mate once. If the environment were flooded with sterile males, the females would unknowingly waste their one chance to reproduce. The population would collapse. But sterilizing millions of flies was no simple task. The solution came from nuclear science. Researchers had found that a specific level of radiation could damage reproductive cells without killing the organism. The plan was to raise millions of screwworm flies, irradiate them just enough to sterilize, and then release them across vast areas. To test the theory, scientists built an artificial paradise for the flies in Florida, then exported them to the island of Curaçao. There, trays filled with ground beef, horse meat, animal blood, milk, and eggs created the perfect breeding environment. Flies were bred, irradiated, and regularly released. Over time, the sterile males diluted the population. Slowly at first, then suddenly, there were none left. Screwworms were eradicated from the island. With proof in hand, the operation scaled up. Massive screwworm factories were built. In Texas alone, one facility consumed 70 tons of meat and 12,000 gallons of blood each week to breed 150 million flies. The rearing process had to mimic life inside a wounded animal. The stench was so overpowering that airlines refused to carry the flies, until transport boxes were sprayed with cologne. With industrial coordination, a wave of biological warfare pushed forward. The screwworms were driven out of Florida, across Texas through Mexico, and deep into Central America. Every new zone required billions of sterile flies and careful planning. The war continues to this day, quiet, invisible and victorious, and unwavering dedication from thousands of workers made it possible. It was an astonishing victory of human ingenuity over one of nature's most horrifying predators. But in 1988, the war took on a new dimension. For the first time, screwworms escaped the Americas and reached Africa. The stakes could not have been higher. If the parasite spread down the Nile Valley or across North Africa, where veterinary care was limited, it could spark a humanitarian and ecological catastrophe. Response: a massive emergency operation was launched. Hundreds of millions of sterile flies were flown in. Ground teams examined millions of animals for any wounds. Public campaigns were launched to explain why planes were dropping boxes filled with flesh-eating American flies. Despite how absurd it may have seemed, the strategy worked. Within 4 months, the outbreak was eradicated, but even as that threat ended, Cochleomyia still maintained a stronghold deep in the Amazon and across much of South America. The region was vast, politically fragmented, and the cost of pushing further southward was astronomical. So instead, a new strategy was formed. The United States and Mexico made a deal with Panama, the narrowest stretch of the continent, to build a permanent biological barrier, a wall of flesh that would prevent any future incursions to the north. Today, in the heart of Panama, a nuclear worm factory runs non-stop, producing an unceasing stream of sterile flies. The technology has come a long way. Gone are the heaps of raw meat. Now, a nutrient-rich sludge of powdered blood, milk and eggs is pumped into trays kept at the same temperature as a living body. In these perfectly controlled environments, flies hatch and are then precisely irradiated to sterilize them, rendering them normal in behavior but biologically hollow. Each week, 100 million of these flies are loaded into dispersal systems mounted inside aircraft. Release parameters, altitude, speed, drop rate, are meticulously calculated. Flight paths are spaced exactly 1.6 kilometers apart in a synchronized aerial campaign that paints the sky with invisible lines of defense. Surveillance teams traverse remote jungles and rugged mountains, inspecting livestock and wildlife for any sign of screwworm activity. But the battle is not over. The wall is failing. In 2016, screwworms reappeared in the Florida Keys. Key deer were found with grotesque wounds. The Paradise Islands quickly turned into a living nightmare. Panama's worm factory swung into action, flying in millions of sterile flies to form a new biological front. The outbreak was contained within months. Then, in late 2023, the barrier broke again. Cochleomyia came roaring back, tearing through Panama and Costa Rica like a parasitic wildfire. Even Mexico was not spared. The worm factory has ramped up to full production, but the situation remains an active biological emergency. No one knows how long it will last. Perhaps one day, this nightmare parasite will finally be eradicated. We've done it before. Other ancient enemies of humanity, like rinderpest and the guinea worm, have been wiped from the earth. But screwworms remain, a uniquely stubborn threat. If you ever find yourself in Central America and see a low-flying plane carving silent paths across the sky, You're witnessing another chapter in one of humanity's strangest and most vital wars. It's a war we can never stop fighting, and one we simply can't afford to lose.